438419 Wei. Zhang stared out the window of his penthouse suite at the Beijing skyline, the morning sun casting long shadows across the city. In just a few hours, he would sit across from the board of directors at Huayang Tech, China's largest technology company. Everything he had built over the last 15 years had led to this moment. Wei straightened his tie for the third time that morning. The face that looked back at him from the mirror belonged to a man who had conquered Silicon Valley. His company, Next Gen Solutions, had revolutionized artificial intelligence. Business magazines called him the innovator of the decade. The world saw a confident, unstoppable force. But today, that same face showed something different. Worry lines around the eyes, tension in the jaw. "Mr. Zhang, your breakfast is ready," called his assistant Lily from the suite's dining area. Wei nodded but couldn't bring himself to eat. His stomach was in knots. This merger would be the crowning achievement of his career, bringing his technology back to his parents' homeland, creating thousands of jobs, and finally proving to his late father that he had made something of himself. His phone buzzed. Picking it up, he saw a message from his translator, David. "Mr. Zhang, I'm so sorry. I've been up all night with severe food poisoning. Doctor says I can't leave the hospital today." Wei read the message twice, hoping the words would somehow change. David had been his trusted translator for years, the only one who truly understood the technical language of Wei's business, the only one Wei trusted to handle the delicate cultural nuances of this negotiation. No, Wei muttered, quickly typing back. "Get better, I'll figure something out." But panic was already rising in his chest. He stepped out into the main room where Lily was organizing documents. "David is sick. Food poisoning. He can't make the meeting," Wei said, his voice tight. Lily's eyes widened. "But the meeting is in 3 hours." "I know," Wei snapped, then immediately regretted his tone. "I'm sorry. This isn't your fault. Call every translation agency in Beijing. We need someone good. Someone who understands business and technology." Lily nodded and got to work. Wei paced the room, his mind racing. How had he not prepared for this? How had he built a billion-dollar company without learning to speak his parents' language? His parents had left China before he was born, determined that their son would be fully American. They spoke English at home, even when their accents made it difficult. His father had forbidden Chinese, saying it would only hold Wei back in America. Even his name had been simplified for American tongues. Now that decision from decades ago threatened everything. The irony wasn't lost on him. The tech genius who had created translation software that couldn't quite replace human understanding was now desperate for a human translator. "I've called 12 agencies," Lily reported 30 minutes later. "They either have no one available on such short notice or their translators don't have the technical background we need." Wei fought the urge to throw his phone across the room. "Keep trying and call Huayang, tell them we might need to—" He couldn't bring himself to say it. To reschedule. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. In Chinese business culture, canceling a meeting of this importance would be seen as deeply disrespectful. The merger could fall apart before it even began. Lily made the call, speaking in careful Mandarin. We watched her face, trying to read the outcome. When she hung up, her expression confirmed his fears. They said they understand, but all their board members have rearranged their schedules for this meeting. Some have flown in from Shanghai and Hong Kong specifically to meet you. They didn't say it directly, but reading between the lines, postponing would be a significant problem. Wei loosened his tie, feeling like it was choking him. "I need air. I'm going for a walk." "Keep calling agencies." The hotel lobby was quiet at this hour. Wei nodded at the front desk staff as he passed, maintaining the appearance of the confident CEO while his mind raced through increasingly desperate options. Could he use his company's translation software? No. Too risky for negotiations this complex. Could one of his team members step in? None had the necessary language skills and business knowledge. For the first time in years, Wei felt completely powerless. He had built his success on preparation, on seeing problems before they arose and having solutions ready. Now he had no solution. He was so lost in thought that he nearly collided with an older man pushing a cleaning cart near the lobby's marble fountain. "Sorry," Wei mumbled, stepping aside. The older man nodded politely and continued mopping the already gleaming floor. He was in his late 60s with a weathered face and careful movements. His hotel uniform was impeccably neat, his name tag reading Chen in both Chinese characters and English letters. Wei continued pacing, his thoughts growing darker by the minute. What would his father say if he could see him now? The great Wei, Zhang, undone by something as basic as language. His father had always predicted he would fail. Too American for China, too Chinese for America, he used to say. In frustration, Wei slammed his hand down on a side table, knocking over an antique vase. The crash echoed through the lobby. "I'm so sorry," Wei said to no one in particular, staring at the broken pieces scattered across the floor. The janitor appeared with his mop and bucket. "No problem, sir. Accidents happen," he said in perfect English with just a hint of an accent. Wei blinked in surprise both at the man's English and his calm demeanor. "Let me help," Wei said, crouching down to pick up a large piece of porcelain. "Better let me handle it, sir. Don't want you cutting yourself before your big meeting," the old man said, efficiently sweeping up the smaller shards. Wei stared at him. "How did you know I have a meeting?" The old man smiled slightly. "The staff talks. Important American businessman staying in the presidential suite. Meeting with Huayang Tech. Big merger. Hotel manager told everyone to provide excellent service." He shrugged. "Plus, only someone with a very important meeting looks as worried as you do right now." There was something about the man's perceptiveness that made Wei pause. "It's that obvious? Only to someone who's watching," the old man replied, depositing the broken vase pieces into his cart. "My apologies if I spoke out of turn." "No, you're right," Wei admitted. "I do have an important meeting, and I am worried. My translator is sick, and without him I might as well cancel everything." The old man nodded sympathetically. "Difficult situation, no backup?" "We've called every agency in Beijing. No one available with the right skills," Wei said, surprised to find himself confiding in the hotel janitor. "I don't speak Chinese well enough for business. My parents wanted me to be American through and through." The old man considered this, as he finished cleaning up the broken vase. "Ironic. My son moved to America 20 years ago. Now my grandchildren barely speak Chinese. Their mother is American." Something about the man's measured speech and thoughtful eyes made Wei ask, "How is your English so good? If you don't mind my asking." The old man smiled, revealing laugh lines around his eyes. "I wasn't always a janitor, Mr. Zhang. Life takes unexpected turns sometimes." The use of his name startled Wei. "You know who I am?" "As I said, the staff talks," Chen replied with a small smile. "And your picture was in the business section of yesterday's paper." Wei's phone buzzed with a message from Lily. "No luck with agencies. Should we try postponing until tomorrow?" Wei looked at the message, then back at the janitor who was now polishing the lobby's brass fixtures with careful attention to detail. "What did you do before this?" Wei asked, gesturing to the cleaning cart. Chen paused, looking at Wei directly. "I taught linguistics at Beijing University for 30 years, specialized in English and Mandarin business communication." He said it simply, without bitterness or pride. Wei felt his heartbeat quicken. "You taught linguistics? Business communication?" Chen nodded. "Yes, but the university reduced staff 5 years ago. My wife needs expensive medical treatments, so now I clean floors." He smiled slightly. "Life is unpredictable." Wei took a deep breath. What he was about to propose was either brilliant or desperate madness. "Mr. Chen, I have a very unusual question. For you." Chen set down his polishing cloth. "I'm listening." "How would you feel about putting your linguistics expertise to use today? I need someone who understands business Mandarin and can translate a complex technology merger negotiation. I would compensate you very well." The old man's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, curiosity, perhaps a touch of amusement. You want me, a hotel janitor, to be your translator for a billion-dollar merger meeting? Wei nodded, dead serious. Yes, that's exactly what I want. Chen studied Wei's face, searching for any sign that this was some kind of joke. Finding none, he leaned slightly on his mop handle. You're serious. Completely serious, Wei said, his voice low and urgent. Mr. Chen, I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. This meeting could change the future of my company. And potentially the future of Huayang Tech as well, Chen added thoughtfully. I read about the proposed merger. Your artificial intelligence, paired with their manufacturing capabilities, could revolutionize several industries. Wei was taken aback by the janitor's knowledge. You follow business news? Old habits, Chen said with a small shrug. I used to prepare case studies for my students using current market developments. I still read the financial papers every morning. He paused, considering. But Mr. Zhang, surely someone of your stature could find a more conventional solution. I've tried, Wei said, glancing at his watch. We have less than 2 hours now. Every agency is booked. Everyone with the qualifications is unavailable. He met Chen's eyes directly. I need someone who understands both languages perfectly, who comprehends business terminology, and who can grasp technical concepts quickly. From our brief conversation, I believe you might be that person. Chen fell silent, his weathered hands resting on the mop. For a moment, Wei thought he might refuse, and the panic began to rise again in his chest. What would your employers think? Chen finally asked, gesturing to his janitor's uniform. Having someone like me represent you? Wei waved away the concern. I don't care what anyone thinks, I care about results. If you can help me communicate effectively with Huayang's board, you could wear pajamas for all I care. A hint of a smile crossed Chen's face. That might be pushing the boundaries of professionalism. He seemed to be weighing something in his mind. There would be conditions. Name them, Wei said immediately. Whatever your usual daily rate is, I'll multiply it by 50. Chen shook his head slowly. It's not about money, Mr. Zhang. Well, not entirely. He straightened his posture, and for a moment Wei could see the professor he must have been. I have some ideas. Research I've been developing on AI-assisted language learning. If I help you today, I would like 15 minutes to present these concepts to you afterward. That's my condition. Wei blinked in surprise. It wasn't at all what he had expected. That's it? 15 minutes of my time? And fair compensation for the day's work, yes, Chen added practically. My wife's treatments are expensive. Done, Wei said without hesitation, extending his hand. And if your research has merit, it might be worth far more than 1 day's pay. Chen shook his hand firmly. I should inform my supervisor I'll be taking personal time today. I'll handle that, Wei said, already pulling out his phone. What's your full name? Chen Laoming, the older man replied. Wei quickly made a call to the hotel manager, explaining that he needed to borrow one of their employees for an urgent business matter and would compensate the hotel appropriately. Money, as usual, smoothed the way. We need to get you changed, Wei said after hanging up, eyeing Chen's uniform. I have clothes in my locker, Chen said. Nothing fancy, I'm afraid. We have time to stop at a men's shop on the way, Wei offered. Chen shook his head. No need. Clean and presentable will be sufficient. Besides, he added with unexpected wisdom, it might be advantageous if they underestimate me at first. Wei found himself nodding in agreement. It was exactly the kind of strategic thinking he valued. 20 minutes later, Chen emerged from the staff area wearing a simple but clean navy blue suit that looked about 10 years out of fashion. His white shirt was crisp and he wore a modest blue tie. Despite the dated style, he carried himself with a natural dignity that transcended his clothing. Wei introduced Chen to Lily, who looked surprised but recovered quickly, her professionalism taking over. I've prepared briefing materials on the key points of the merger, she told Chen, handing him a tablet. Would you like me to go over them with you? That would be helpful, thank you, Chen said, taking a seat at the suite's dining table. Wei watched as Chen absorbed the complex technical information with remarkable speed, asking occasional precise questions that revealed his quick understanding. The knot in Wei's stomach began to loosen slightly. Perhaps this crazy gamble might actually work. While Chen and Lily reviewed the materials, Wei called David at the hospital to check on his condition and assure him that a solution had been found. "Don't worry about anything except getting better," we told him. "We've found someone to fill in." "Who?" David asked weakly. Wei hesitated. "A local language expert with a background in business communication." After hanging up, Wei joined Chen and Lily at the table. "How are you feeling about this?" he asked Chen directly. "The technical concepts are fascinating," Chen replied, scrolling through the documents on the tablet. "Your neural network approach to predictive analysis is quite innovative. I particularly appreciate how you've designed it to respect privacy boundaries while still providing actionable insights." Wei was impressed. Most people without a technical background struggled to grasp even the basics of his AI systems. "And the language aspects? The negotiation?" Chen looked up from the tablet. "Mandarin is my native language, Mr. Zhang. English has been my professional focus for over 40 years. The cultural nuances of Chinese business negotiations were part of my teaching curriculum." He said this not with arrogance, but with the simple confidence of stating facts. "Then I think we're as ready as we can be," Wei said, checking his watch. "The car will be here in 15 minutes. While they waited, Wei noticed Chen standing by the window, looking out at the city with a pensive expression. "Second thoughts?" Wei asked, joining him. Chen shook his head slightly. "Just reflecting. 5 years cleaning floors and suddenly I'm back in a world I thought had forgotten me." He turned away. "Life takes unexpected turns, as I said. This morning I was mopping up coffee spills. Now I'm helping negotiate a multi-billion-dollar merger. Does it make you nervous?" Wei asked. "No," Chen said thoughtfully. "The stakes are high for you, but for me..." He smiled slightly. "What's the worst that could happen? I go back to my mop tomorrow?" There was something powerful in his calm acceptance that Wei, despite all his wealth and success, found himself envying. The ride to Huayang Tech's headquarters was quiet, each man lost in his thoughts. The imposing glass and steel building rose 60 stories above Beijing's business district, its architecture a blend of traditional Chinese elements and ultra-modern design. In the elevator rising to the top floor, Wei felt the familiar pre-meeting tension, the heightened awareness, the slight elevation in heart rate that had accompanied every major deal of his career. He glanced at Chen, who stood calmly beside him, hands folded in front of him, appearing completely at ease. "Any last-minute advice?" Wei asked quietly. Chen considered for a moment. "Remember that in Chinese business culture, the relationship often matters more than the immediate deal. They will be evaluating you as a potential long-term partner, not just assessing the technology." Wei nodded. It was something David had told him repeatedly during their preparations. "Also," Chen added, "don't be surprised if they begin with general conversation rather than diving straight into business. It's not time wasting, it's relationship building." The elevator doors opened onto a reception area, decorated with an elegant blend of traditional Chinese art and contemporary furniture. A young woman in a crisp business suit greeted them in English. "Mr. Zhang, welcome to Huayang Tech. The board is ready for you in the main conference room." Wei introduced Chen simply as Professor Chen, my translator for today, deliberately using his former title. The receptionist gave a respectful nod to the older man. As they followed her down the hallway, Wei whispered to Chen, "Ready?" Chen gave a small smile. "I've been preparing for this moment for 40 years, Mr. Zhang. I just didn't know it." They entered a large conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a spectacular view of Beijing. Around a massive table of polished rosewood sat 12 men and women, all watching Wei and Chen with expressions of polite interest. At the head of the table stood Chairman Zhao, a legendary figure in Chinese business circles. In his 70s, with a full head of silver hair and piercing eyes, he had transformed Huayang from a small electronics manufacturer into a global powerhouse. Mr. Zhang, Zhao said in accented but clear English, extending his hand. Welcome to Huayang. Wei shook his hand firmly. Thank you for accommodating the change in translators, Chairman Zhao. This is Professor Chen who will be assisting us today. Zhao turned his attention to Chen, switching to rapid Mandarin. Chen responded with equal fluency, his posture and tone conveying both respect and quiet confidence. Wei couldn't understand the words, but he could read the subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. The board members' expressions changed from polite interest to something more engaged. Several nodded slightly as Chen spoke. Chen turned to Wei. Chairman Zhao welcomes us and says he appreciates adaptability in business partners. He's suggesting we begin with tea before discussing the merger details. As the tea was served in delicate porcelain cups, Wei caught Chen's eye and gave him a slight nod of thanks. The real test was just beginning, but somehow Wei felt his confidence returning. Perhaps this unexpected partnership might work after all. The tea ceremony stretched for 20 minutes, with small talk flowing between sips from the delicate cups. Wei fought his American instinct to rush toward business, reminded of Chen's advice about relationship building. He watched as Chen conversed easily with the board members, occasionally translating their questions about Wei's background and his experiences in China. They're curious about your connection to China, Chen explained quietly. It would be good to share something personal. Wei nodded and spoke of his parents who had left Shanghai in the 1970s, his childhood in California, and his first visit to China as a college student. Chen translated, adding subtle flourishes that Wei couldn't understand but that clearly resonated with the board members who nodded and smiled appreciatively. Finally, Chairman Zhao set down his cup and said something to Chen, who turned to Wei. The chairman suggests we move to the business at hand. For the next hour, the discussion flowed through the complex details of the proposed merger. Wei presented his company's AI technology, its applications, and market potential, while Chen translated with impressive precision. Even technical terms that Wei thought might be challenging were conveyed smoothly, with Chen occasionally asking for clarification on the most cutting-edge concepts. What amazed Wei most was how Chen seemed to capture not just his words but his passion for the technology. When Wei described his vision for how their combined companies could revolutionize healthcare diagnostics in rural areas, Chen's translation made several board members lean forward with interest. Then came the board's questions, pointed, detailed, inquiries about everything from data security to market penetration strategies. Through Chen, Wei answered each one carefully, aware that millions of dollars hinged on every word. During a particularly technical exchange about neural network architecture with Huayang's chief technology officer, Wei noticed something remarkable. Chen wasn't just translating anymore. He was actively facilitating the discussion, bridging the gap between Wei's Silicon Valley terminology and the CTO's Chinese technical framework. He's asking about processing power requirements, Chen explained to Wei. But I believe he's actually concerned about scalability for smaller devices. Their company has a strong presence in the mobile market. Wei adjusted his response accordingly, addressing the underlying concern rather than just the surface question. The CTO nodded with satisfaction at the answer. 2 hours into the meeting, Wei could sense they were making progress. The initial formality had given way to more engaged discussion. Several board members were taking extensive notes, and Chairman Zhao had asked detailed questions about implementation timelines. Then came the critical moment. Zhao spoke at length, his tone serious with occasional gestures toward the financial projections displayed on the room's large screen. The other board members grew quiet, watching Wei carefully. Chen listened intently, his expression neutral. When Zhao finished, Chen turned to Wei and spoke softly. This is the key negotiation point. They're concerned about the revenue sharing model in year 3, when your technology would be fully integrated into their hardware. They think the proposed 60-40 split in your favor doesn't reflect the manufacturing costs and market risks they'll be assuming in the Asian markets. Wei felt a flash of frustration. This was exactly the sticking point he'd anticipated and had prepared to hold firm on. His technology was the revolutionary element, The hardware was secondary. Tell them the split reflects the R&D investment we've made over 7 years, Wei said firmly. Our AI is the value driver here. Chen nodded but hesitated slightly. May I suggest something, Mr. Zhang? Wei raised an eyebrow, surprised. In Chinese business culture, there's a concept called zhonghe, harmony and balance, Chen explained quietly. Perhaps acknowledge their concerns about manufacturing costs before restating your position. It shows respect for their perspective. Wei considered this. It wasn't how negotiations typically worked in Silicon Valley, where directness was valued. But he hadn't come this far to ignore expert advice. Okay, he nodded. Tell them I understand their concerns about manufacturing costs and market development. Then explain that the 60-40 split reflects our extensive R&D investment. Chen translated, his tone respectful but firm. He added something at the end that Wei hadn't said, with a slight gesture that seemed almost like a professor making a point. Chairman, Jay responded with interest, leading to a rapid exchange between him and Chen. Several board members joined in, and Wei found himself completely in the dark, reliant on Chen in a way he wasn't accustomed to. Finally, Chen turned back to Wei. I took the liberty of suggesting a compromise, he said. The 60-40 split remains for the first 3 years, but if certain manufacturing cost thresholds are exceeded, it shifts to 55-45. Additionally, for markets where Huayang already has strong distribution, they would receive an additional 5% of revenues for the first 2 years to reflect their established presence. Wei blinked in surprise. It was actually a brilliant solution, maintaining his core position while acknowledging their concerns. It would cost NextGen some profit in specific markets, but it protected the overall structure he wanted. That's actually very good, Wei said. Did they seem receptive? Chairman Zhao has asked for 10 minutes to discuss with his team, Chen replied. He seemed interested in the approach. Wei and Chen were escorted to a smaller meeting room while the board deliberated. As soon as they were alone, Wei turned to Chen. What exactly did you say to them? That wasn't just a translation of my points. Chen smiled slightly. I may have added a Chinese proverb about how the tallest tree catches the most wind, but needs the strongest roots. Then I suggested that your technology is the wind-catching branches, but their manufacturing expertise is the root system. Both are essential for the tree to thrive. Wei shook his head in amazement. That's not typically how we negotiate in Silicon Valley. This isn't Silicon Valley, Chen replied simply. Chairman Zhao has a doctorate in classical Chinese literature as well as business. He appreciates such references. Wei studied the older man with new respect. You're not just translating words. You're translating entire cultural frameworks. That was my specialty at the university, Chen said with a modest shrug. Language without cultural context is just noise. Before Wei could respond, there was a knock at the door. The receptionist informed them that the board was ready to continue. When they returned to the conference room, the atmosphere had shifted, subtly. Chairman Zhao looked directly at Wei and spoke in his accented English. Mr. Zhang, we find Professor Chen's suggested approach interesting. With some small adjustments, it could work for us. Wei glanced at Chen, surprised that Zhao was speaking English and that he had referred to Chen's suggestion rather than Wei's. It was an acknowledgement of Chen's role beyond mere translator. For the next hour, they worked through the details of the compromise, with Chen alternating between translator and active participant in the discussion. When technical terms became complex, they switched back to having Chen translate. But for broader concepts, the conversation flowed between English and Mandarin, with Chen filling the gaps. By late afternoon, they had reached agreement on the major points. The merger would proceed with the modified revenue-sharing model Chen had suggested, along with clear milestones for technology integration and market expansion. As they prepared to conclude, Chairman Zhao rose from his seat and addressed Wei directly. Mr. Zhang, NextGen's technology is impressive, but equally impressive is a businessman who understands the importance of appropriate representation in cross-cultural negotiations. His eyes shifted to Chen. Your choice of professor, Chen demonstrates wisdom that gives us confidence in this partnership. Wei felt a moment of guilt, knowing that wisdom had nothing to do with it. Pure desperation had led him to Chen. But he simply nodded and thanked the chairman. As they gathered their materials, the board members approached Chen one by one, exchanging words that Wei couldn't understand but could tell were respectful. One older woman on the board spoke with Chen at length, her expression animated. "What was that about?" Wei asked, as they finally left the conference room. "Dr. Lin was one of my students 30 years ago," Chen explained with a small smile. "She remembered my lectures on international business communication." Wei stopped walking. "One of your students is on Huayang's board?" Chen nodded. "The world is smaller than we think. She was brilliant. I'm not surprised by her success." As they rode the elevator down, Wei felt a strange mix of emotions: relief at the successful negotiation, amazement at the coincidences that had brought Chen into his path, and a lingering question about why a man of such obvious talent and connections was mopping floors at a hotel. "We should celebrate," Wei said as they reached the lobby. "Dinner at the best restaurant in Beijing tonight, my treat, of course." Chen shook his head slightly. "I should get home to my wife. She'll be wondering where I've been all day." He paused. "But I would appreciate a chance to show you my research as we agreed." Wei had almost forgotten their deal in the excitement of the successful negotiation. "Of course. Tomorrow morning? At my hotel?" "That would be perfect," Chen said. "And now, if you'll excuse me, I should call my wife." As Chen stepped away to make his call, Wei watched him with newfound respect. In a single day, this unassuming janitor had not only saved his most important business deal, but had actually improved it. The question that kept running through Wei's mind was, what other talents might be hiding behind that modest exterior? Wei woke early the next morning, his mind already racing with plans for the merger implementation. He ordered breakfast to his suite and opened his laptop, firing off emails to his executive team back in California. The message was triumphant. The deal was moving forward, with contracts to be finalized within weeks. His phone buzzed with congratulatory responses, his team excited about this new chapter for NextGen. One message stood out, a note from his CFO asking who the brilliant negotiator was that had crafted the revenue-sharing compromise. Wei stared at the message, realizing he still hadn't told his team the full story about Chen. How exactly? Would he explain that their billion-dollar deal had been saved by a hotel janitor? At precisely 9 o'clock, there was a knock at his suite door. Wei opened it to find Chen standing there, dressed in the same dated but neat suit from yesterday. He carried a worn leather briefcase that had seen better days. "Good morning, Mr. Zhang," Chen said with a small bow. "Please, after yesterday, I think you can call me Wei," he replied, gesturing for Chen to enter. "And good morning to you, Professor Chen." A hint of a smile crossed Chen's face at the title. "Old habits die hard, I see." "Not at all," Wei said. "It's the appropriate title for someone of your expertise." Chen set his briefcase on the table. "My wife couldn't believe it when I told her about yesterday. She thought I was making up stories." "How is she?" Wei asked, genuinely interested. "Better. The treatments are working, but they're expensive," Chen said matter-of-factly. "Which reminds me, I should thank you properly for yesterday's opportunity." Wei waved away the thanks. "I'm the one who should be thanking you. The deal wouldn't have happened without your help." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. "This is the payment we agreed on plus a bonus." Chen accepted the envelope with a dignified nod, not checking the contents. "Thank you. This will help tremendously with my wife's medical bills." "Now," Wei said, gesturing to the briefcase, "I believe you have some research to show me." Chen nodded and carefully opened the briefcase, removing a tablet that looked at least 5 years old and several notebooks filled with neat handwriting. "My research focuses on using artificial intelligence to create truly adaptive language learning systems," he began, his voice taking on the clear, measured tone of a professor. For the next 15 minutes, Chen walked Wei through his concepts. The ideas were surprisingly sophisticated, far beyond what Wei had expected. Chen had developed a theoretical framework for how AI could assess not just vocabulary and grammar skills,
but cultural fluency, adjusting teaching methods in real time,
based on the learner's cultural background and learning style. The problem with current language learning software, Chen explained, is that it treats language as a set of rules and vocabulary to memorize. But language is contextual, cultural, alive. My approach would help learners understand not just what to say, but how and when to say it in different cultural contexts. Wei found himself leaning forward with interest. This is remarkably aligned with some of our work at NextGen. I've followed your company's research publications, Chen admitted. Your neural network architecture could potentially implement these theories in ways I could only dream of. Wei picked up one of the notebooks, flipping through pages of meticulous notes, diagrams, and theoretical models. How long have you been working on this? About 20 years, Chen said. At first as part of my university research, then as a private project after I changed careers. There was no bitterness in his voice, just a simple statement of fact. We looked up from the notebook. What happened at the university? If you don't mind my asking. Chen sighed slightly. Politics mostly. The department had changed, and the new leadership had different priorities. My focus on cultural aspects of language learning was considered outdated. They wanted more emphasis on business language, less on cultural understanding. The irony being that your cultural understanding was precisely what made yesterday's negotiation successful, Wei observed. Chen smiled slightly. Yes, well, life is full of ironies. He tapped one of the notebooks. After leaving the university, I continued refining these ideas. I always believed that true communication crosses more than language barriers, it crosses cultural divides. Wei nodded slowly, his mind racing ahead. There was genuine innovation in Chen's approach, something that could complement NextGen's existing language technology. But more than that, there was a depth of understanding that his young team of brilliant but inexperienced programmers lacked. Professor Chen, Wei said carefully, what would you think about developing these ideas further, with proper resources and technical support? Chen looked surprised. That would be a dream, certainly, but at my age, who would hire me to lead such a project? Wei set down the notebook. I would. Chen stared at him. You're not serious. I'm entirely serious, Wei replied. NextGen has a language division that's been working on similar concepts, but without your depth of cultural understanding. Your approach could be revolutionary if paired with our technical capabilities. Mr. Zhang, Wei, Chen began, shaking his head. I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm 68 years old. I haven't been in academia for 5 years. My technical knowledge is outdated. But your understanding of how humans learn language across cultural barriers is timeless, Wei countered, and clearly not outdated, given yesterday's results. Chen fell silent, looking down at his lifetime of research spread across the table. It seems impossible, he said finally. 5 years ago, would you have thought it possible that you'd be negotiating a billion-dollar merger? Wei asked with a smile. That brought a small chuckle from Chen. Fair point. Here's my proposal, Wei said, leaning forward. Join NextGen as a consultant initially. Work with our language team to develop a prototype based on your research. If it shows promise, we can discuss a more permanent arrangement. Chen's eyes showed a spark that hadn't been there before. And I could continue to live in Beijing? My wife's doctors are here. Of course, Wei nodded. In fact, with the Huayang merger, we'll be establishing a significant presence in Beijing. Your cultural expertise would be invaluable as we integrate the teams. Chen took a deep breath. May I have some time to think about it? To discuss it with my wife? Absolutely, Wei said. Take whatever time you need. Chen carefully gathered his notebooks and tablet, returning them to the briefcase. As he closed it, he looked up at Wei with a curious expression. May I ask you something personal? Of course. Why are you doing this? Is it gratitude for yesterday? Because while the payment is very generous, Wei shook his head. It's not about yesterday, though. That certainly opened my eyes to your abilities. He paused, trying to articulate something he was just beginning to understand himself. Throughout my career, I've been surrounded by brilliant people with impressive credentials. But yesterday I watched you bridge worlds in a way that no one with a fancy degree on my team could have done. He gestured to the briefcase. Those ideas represent decades of wisdom and understanding. In Silicon Valley, we worship youth and innovation, but we often miss the value of experience and deep knowledge. I think there's something powerful in bringing those worlds together. Chen studied him thoughtfully. Your father would be proud of such wisdom. The comment caught Wei by surprise. I never said much about my father. You didn't need to, Chen said gently. I recognize the drive of someone trying to prove something to a parent even after they're gone. I have the same relationship with my own son. Wei felt an unexpected emotion rise in his throat. Few people had ever seen through his carefully constructed exterior so easily. Before he could respond, his phone rang. The Huayang legal team with questions about the contract drafts. Wei excused himself to take the call, stepping into the other room. When he returned 10 minutes later, Chen was standing by the window, looking out at the Beijing skyline with a contemplative expression. Everything okay with Huayang? Chen asked. Just details to iron out, Wei said. Nothing concerning. He joined Chen at the window. Beautiful city, isn't it? So much history alongside the modern. Chen nodded. I've watched it transform over decades. Sometimes I hardly recognize it. He turned to Wei. I've been thinking about your offer. And? I'm interested, but I have one condition, Chen said. Whatever we develop must be made accessible to rural schools in China, not just elite institutions or wealthy companies. Wei raised an eyebrow. That's your condition? Not salary or title? Those matter less to me at this point in my life, Chen said simply. I grew up in a rural village where education was our only path forward. Many children there still struggle to access quality language learning, which limits their opportunities. Wei felt something shift in his perspective. Here was a man who had faced career setbacks, been reduced to cleaning floors to pay medical bills, and yet his first thought was for children he'd never meet. We can make that happen, Wei said. In fact, it aligns perfectly with some corporate responsibility initiatives I've been considering. Chen extended his hand. Then I accept your offer, Mr. Zhang. Wei shook it firmly. Welcome to Next Gen, Professor Chen. That afternoon, Wei took Chen to meet Lily and the rest of his small Beijing team. He introduced him simply as Professor Chen, our new consultant on cross-cultural communication and language learning technology. If the team was surprised by the addition of the elderly Chinese man to their ranks, they hid it well. Wei had learned long ago to hire people who valued results over appearances. As they began discussing the merger integration plans, Wei watched Chen engage with his team, offering insights about Chinese business culture that would prove invaluable in the coming months. The janitor had transformed back into the professor before his eyes, sharing wisdom accumulated over decades of study and experience. Wei's phone buzzed with a message from his assistant back in California, asking when he'd be returning. Looking at Chen expertly explaining cultural nuances to his fascinated team, Wei realized his plans had changed. The Beijing office would need his presence during this critical integration phase, and he had much to learn from his unexpected new mentor. I'll be extending my stay, he typed back. There's important work to be done here. 6 months later, Wei stood at the window of NextGen's new Beijing headquarters, watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled. Behind him, the spacious office hummed with activity, engineers and linguists collaborating, screens displaying code and language modules, the occasional burst of laughter cutting through the focused atmosphere. In the center of it all sat Professor Chen, now properly dressed in tailored suits but still carrying the same worn leather briefcase, working with a team of young programmers. His language learning project had progressed from theoretical concept to working prototype in record time, combining his deep cultural insights with NextGen's advanced AI capabilities. Wei's phone buzzed with a message from Lily, reminding him about the dinner that evening celebrating the successful merger with Huayang Tech. 6 months of integration had gone more smoothly than anyone anticipated, largely thanks to Chen's guidance on navigating cultural differences. Professor? Wei called across the office. We should leave soon for the celebration dinner. Chen looked up from his work and nodded, saying something to the young programmer beside him before standing. As he crossed the office to join Wei, several employees stopped him with questions or comments, each interaction marked by genuine respect. "They've really taken to you," Wei observed as Chen reached him. "Young minds hungry for knowledge," Chen replied with a modest smile. "It reminds me of my teaching days." They took the elevator down to the lobby where a car waited to take them to the restaurant. As they rode through Beijing's evening traffic, Wei reflected on the whirlwind months since that desperate morning when he'd lost his translator. "I received the latest usage statistics for the rural education program today," Wei said. "Over 5,000 students in remote areas are now using the basic version of your language platform." Chen's face lit up. "Already? I thought the rollout wasn't scheduled until next month." "We accelerated it," Wei said. "The early test results were too promising to wait." Chen looked out the window, but not before Wei caught the glimmer of emotion in his eyes. "That means a great deal to me." "It's just the beginning," Wei assured him. "Once we refine the system based on this initial data, we'll expand to more schools." The restaurant was in an elegant courtyard house in one of Beijing's historic districts, chosen specifically because it represented the blend of tradition and innovation that characterized the next-gen Huayang partnership. As they entered, Wei spotted Chairman Zhao already holding court at the main table, surrounded by executives from both companies. The chairman rose when he saw them, greeting Chen first in Mandarin before switching to English for Wei. "The men of the hour, the architects of our success." The meal was spectacular. Course after course of Beijing's finest cuisine served as executives from both companies shared stories of the merger's challenges and triumphs. Wei noticed how seamlessly Chen moved between languages and cultural contexts, making everyone feel included regardless of their background. Midway through dinner, Wei's phone buzzed with an urgent message from California. He excused himself to take a video call in a private room provided by the restaurant. His CFO appeared on screen looking concerned. "We've got a situation with the Rodriguez contract," she explained. "They're threatening to pull out unless we can address their concerns about data security in the Asian markets." Wei listened to the details, asking pointed questions. The Rodriguez Group was their largest client in South America, and losing them would be a significant blow. "I'll handle it," Wei promised. "Set up a call with their CEO for tomorrow morning my time." When he returned to the dinner, he found Chen engaged in an animated conversation with Dr. Lin, his former student who sat on Huayang's board. They were speaking rapid Mandarin, occasionally laughing like old friends reunited. "Everything okay?" Chen asked when Wei sat back down. "Just some issues with a client back home," Wei said. "Nothing that can't be resolved?" Chen studied his face. "You seem concerned." "It's a big client," Wei admitted quietly. "And they're worried about our expansion into Asia affecting data security." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Cultural differences in how privacy is viewed?" "Exactly. They don't understand that we maintain separate data infrastructures. Perhaps this calls for another cultural bridge," Chen suggested. Wei looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "When you speak with them tomorrow, I could assist. Not as a translator, but as a cultural interpreter. Help them understand the measures we've put in place that respect both Eastern and Western approaches to data." Wei considered this. "That could be extremely helpful." "Consider it done," Chen said simply. As the dinner wound down, Chairman Zhao rose to make a toast. He spoke in Mandarin first, then repeated his words in careful English. 6 months ago, we began a partnership that many thought would face insurmountable cultural and technological challenges. Today, we celebrate not just surviving those challenges, but thriving because of them." He raised his glass. "To Next Gen and Huayang, proving that the greatest innovation comes from bringing different worlds together." After the toast, as guests mingled over dessert, Wei found himself standing with Chen in a quiet corner of the restaurant. "I never properly thanked you," Wei said. Chen looked surprised. "For what?" "You've been more than generous with compensation and support for my research." "Not for the work," Wei clarified. For the lesson, 6 months ago I was so focused on credentials and appearances that I nearly missed the opportunity to learn from someone with true wisdom. Chen smiled slightly. The ancient philosophers taught that wisdom often comes disguised as misfortune. Your translator's illness became your good fortune. And yours, Wei added. Indeed, Chen agreed. Though I sometimes miss the simplicity of my janitorial days. Fewer emails. They both laughed, and Wei realized how rarely he had laughed in the years of building his company. The drive to prove himself, to validate his father's sacrifices, had left little room for joy. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Chen's phone rang. He answered it with a concerned expression that quickly turned to surprise, then delight. After a brief conversation in Mandarin, he hung up, looking slightly dazed. Good news? Wei asked. My wife's doctor, Chen explained. Her latest tests show the cancer is in remission. They're cautiously optimistic about her recovery. Wei felt a surge of genuine happiness for this man who had become not just a colleague, but a friend. That's wonderful news. We should celebrate. Yes, Chen agreed, his voice thick with emotion. A celebration is definitely in order. The next morning, Wei and Chen connected with the Rodriguez Group CEO from NextGen's Beijing office. Just as Chen had predicted, the client's concerns were as much about cultural understanding as technical specifications. With Chen's help explaining the cultural context behind their security protocols, the client's worries were addressed and the contract was saved. After the call, Wei sat back in his chair, shaking his head in amazement. 6 months ago I would have thrown money and technical specifications at that problem. And now? Chen asked. Now I understand that sometimes the most important thing isn't the technology itself, but how it's understood across different perspectives. Chen nodded approvingly. You're learning. Later that afternoon, Wei called a company-wide meeting for both NextGen and Huayang staff. Standing at the front of the packed conference room, with Chen beside him, he made an announcement. Today, I'm pleased to announce the creation of the Chen Ming Foundation for Cross-Cultural Education, Wei said. Funded with an initial $50 million, the foundation will support language education in rural communities across China and develop cultural exchange programs for students worldwide. The room erupted in applause. Chen looked genuinely surprised. You didn't tell me about this, he whispered to Wei. I wanted it to be a surprise, Wei replied. The board approved it unanimously this morning. As the applause continued, Wei raised his hand for silence. Additionally, I'm proud to announce that Professor Chen Laoming will serve as the Foundation's director, bringing his lifetime of wisdom and research to this important work. More applause followed, with many of Chen's young team members cheering enthusiastically. Chen himself seemed momentarily at a loss for words, his usual composure giving way to visible emotion. When the meeting ended and the excited staff dispersed, Chen remained behind with Wei. I don't know what to say, Chen admitted. This is far beyond anything I imagined when I picked up those broken vase pieces 6 months ago. It's what you deserve, Wei said simply. And it's what the world needs, more bridges between cultures, not walls. Chen smiled. My father was a village teacher. He always told me that true wealth isn't measured in money but in how many lives you touch. By that measure, this foundation makes me a very rich man indeed. Wei thought of his own father who had sacrificed everything to give his son opportunities in America. My father measured success by achievements and status. It's taken me until now to realize there are other measures that matter more. Perhaps, Chen suggested gently, the greatest achievement is learning to see value where others do not, whether in people or ideas. Wei nodded, thinking back to that desperate morning in the hotel lobby, when he had seen only a janitor where a professor stood. How many other treasures of wisdom and talent went unnoticed in the world because they didn't come in the expected packages? As they walked together toward Chen's new office, no longer a corner of the open workspace but a proper room with his name on the door, Wei made a silent promise to himself. The lesson of Chen would not be forgotten. Sometimes the most valuable people are the ones most easily overlooked, And sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from the most unexpected places. Ready to change the world, Professor? Wei asked as they reached the door. Chen smiled. One student at a time, Mr. Zhang, one student at a time.